Welcome to the Rock. Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show from the Rock of Gibraltar. Today, in the second of our three-part series, we focus attention on the peoples and the communities of this fascinating territory. We delve into the history and the culture, and we talk to some interesting characters. But first, over to Tasmina, who has your tweets, your emails, and your messages.
Of course, this is in relation to the Brexit show, and as ever, there are strong opinions. Emmy says, Campbell seems to have forgotten those in the majority who voted for Brexit. Whether you agree with them or not, they voted democratically. So does Labour not believe in democracy anymore? And Rob is rather uncomplimentary about the DUP. He says, how laughable are they? Just watch Sammy Wilson MP assert on the Alex Salmond Show that it's for the Republic of Ireland and the EU to resolve the Irish border crisis. A bit like saying my dog has pooped on the pavement, now it's for my neighbours to clean it up. Graham Vincent, in response to Theresa May's lack of giving interviews, says, has a Premier ever done less in the media? I can't remember one involved interview with this lady. Arthur Stramash says, great Alex Salmond Show Brexit special. Celtic nations well represented, and rightly they should be. Wide variety of guests, all allowed to speak without constant interruption or badgering. Bravo, Taz and Alex. Well, thank you, Arthur. And then Robert, in response to Alex, who said that Theresa May was the least disliked PM. Robert says least, bit of an understatement there, Alex boy. Well, Robert, I'm inclined to agree with you. And back to the man himself in Gibraltar.
I'm now joined by a whale-kent face in these parts. Tito Vallejo, local historian, knows just about everything there is to know about the Rock. Tito, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Glad to be here.
Now, we're at Devil's Gap, which is a fantastic place to talk about Gibraltar. But firstly, I know that a lot of places in Gibraltar seem to have devils
The devil
in
in
it.
them, the devil.
Does that reflect the turbulent history?
Most maybe, well, why not? But people are not very annoyed with the names. We even had an ex-bishop called Father Devlin. He had the devil in him too, though he was a very nice person. But yeah, we have about six or seven.
You don't have Angel's Point or, you know, Heavenly Choir or something?
No, but we have many churches and cathedrals to cater for that, you know, to like...
Now, from here at Devil's Gap, I mean, you can see the changes that are taking place. I mean, when you were a lad, where was the sea?
Well, the sea was much closer. There are places which are, for example, where I live today, I used to fish and swim there once upon a time. The naval grounds, which is where you see those buildings now, I used to go to the boulevard to watch the amphibious aircraft landing here on the bay.
Devil's Gap and the batteries here reflect the military past. I mean, this has been a military base of one kind or another for thousands of years. But that has changed dramatically in the last quarter of a century. But tell us about that change.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Gibraltar is famous for what it is, a fortress. Everybody knows the fortress of Gibraltar. And throughout the years, we've had people of all kinds living here, from the Moors to the Spanish to the British. And with the British occupation, I must tell you that it's been a focal point in British history. Remember, this was the path to Malta, to Egypt, to South Africa. When they opened the Suez Canal, again a passage. Ships used to come here to get coal and victualling and things like that. So it's been very important in the lifeline of Great Britain, to put it that way.
But the percentage of military spending in Gibraltar has gone from, what, 60% to 6% in a couple of decades.
Definitely.
How has the Rock coped with that change?
Well, we've had to change from one thing to another. For example, what was once a dockyard is now a commercial yard. And if you look in the docks, ironically, you're going to see many Spanish ships coming here to have refits instead of going to their own docks, because we're more economic in Gibraltar than they're in Spain.
And out here, I mean, half the world's shipping still comes through the Straits of Gibraltar.
I think it's the busiest place in the world where ships come through.
When you were in the Defence Forces yourself, did you ever think when you were doing that you'd live to see the day that financial services and gaming and tourism dominated the economy of the Rock?
Oh, no way. Tourism was always, I've always called tourism the Cinderella of Gibraltar. It's always been there. Everybody who comes to Gibraltar wants to see the apes, wants to see the caves, wants to see the highlights. But other than that, Gibraltar's had to change throughout the times. The situations we've been through, Spain closing its border and things like that. And I've always told people, I said, look, it's one man's meat is another man's poison. some businesses have to close, others sprout as a result of what happens, you see? And I've always said that in Gibraltar we are natural survivors. No matter what, during the Second World War, the whole population was evacuated, the civilians, women, children, you know. And we went through that. My dad stayed behind, he was a gunner. But we've been through many, many other episodes we've been hit hard, but I always say Gibraltar's like a cat. When you grab it like that and you drop it, it always falls on its feet.
So how many lives have you had then?
Well, a few. I mean,
and how has these changes affected the people? I mean, you know, it strikes me as a community which is a service base with a bit of trade and shipping thrown in. It's fundamentally different from a community which is based on services, financial services, yes, and things like that. So how are the complexion of the people of Gibraltar changing as the economy changes?
We have to change with the times, and people Gibraltarians are very resilient. You know, what's in at the moment, we go for that. We don't say we have to break with traditions sometimes. You know, we are very, how shall I say, apt to changes. Something like you can't adapt to change. No, we do. We have to adapt whether we like it or not. We have to move with the times. We cannot stay living in the old colonial days. You know, just Buana, things like that. Things change, and we have to adapt to the best means that are available.
Tito, nobody knows more than you about the history of the Rock. But tell me a bit about the future. How confident are you of Gibraltar continuing to flourish in this new world?
Gibraltar's economy is very, very sound. We are very well founded, let's put it that way. Unfortunately, we have a neighbor who's always hampering us, and we have to be here at the whims of whoever's governing in Spain. Now, if we had a better association with Spain, this would be paradise. To start with, look at this bay. Look at the ISO we've got there, refinery. That was Franco's doing. That refinery was going to the north of Spain, but he actually put it there to entice the Spanish workers here. Don't worry, when we close the border, you've got a job. Sorry, there's no jobs. There's only for about 80. The rest had to emigrate. And that hinterland became a ghost town, you know.
So it must be interesting. I mean, you've got Spanish ancestry yourself, yes, like many Gibraltarians. So that difficult relationship with your neighbour must be a source of some grief to you.
Not really, because what happens is I try to convince people about the truth of things that happen. I give talks and I always show things. I don't just talk. I say, look at this treaty. Look at what happened here. Look at what happened there. And when they see it with their own eyes, they say, well, we've never been told that. Well, I'm telling you now. Look how like Goebbels used to say, give a lie. Tell it so many times that you come to believe it. And that's our Spanish friends there. And sometimes they won't even admit that they're wrong. I remember one telling me...
Well, they're not the only nation who doesn't do that.
No, but I'm telling you, one of them, I remember said, oh, I'm sorry for you Gibraltarians, what the British did to you. I said, what did the British do to us? He said, they closed the border. You know, it was Spain. No, it wasn't. And another thing I'm trying to infiltrate is, with these co-sovereignty things that they're offering Gibraltar. And I said, tomorrow, Mexico is offering co-sovereignty to the United States.
Well, you never know.
How about that?
If they build the wall, then President Trump might accept. But it ever occurred to you, Tito, that, you know, back in the Great Siege in the late 18th century, I mean, if that had been an English general instead of a Scottish general defending, they probably would have surrendered.
I don't think so. The pride was too much at the time. And remember, we had Germans here as well. We had the Hanoverians fighting alongside the British here. Right. Okay? So that was one of Gibraltar's milestones in history.
Of course, during the First World War, both German soldiers and British soldiers had the same emblem from the Siege of Gibraltar.
Exactly, the Gibraltar sleeve.
Which tells us that history has a way of playing tricks on you. But in terms of the future, you think that the Rock is standing strong?
We are standing strong, and I hope that our neighbours try and follow our example. I mean, with this new government that they've got in, they need to change their laws. They're still very antiquated.
Well, traditionally, a centre-left government in Spain has been friendlier towards good relations than the Popular Party of Senior Rajoy.
Exactly.
Much lamented.
And Margallo. But it's a pity that these people came in, because we're going in a very nice way. You know, the first time that the Iberia, the Spanish airline, came to Gibraltar, the first time that the Foreign Secretary officially came to Gibraltar, and things were looking good. And all of a sudden, these people come in and they crash everything they had done. We even had an Instituto Cervantes in Gibraltar, you know? They took that away as well. Honestly, and we have to live with what happens next door, unfortunately.
Tito, I can't guarantee the future, but what I can do is guarantee you an Alex Salmond quaich. You know the drill.
Oh, yeah.
Whiskey in the quaich, pass it round your many close friends, but of course
I need a bigger one, but
only Scotch.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
The Rock is not just about high politics and high property prices. There is a thriving cultural hinterland in Gibraltar. And one of its cultural icons joins me now, David Bentata.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you.
Now, there's something strikes me a bit Scottish about that name, Bentata.
Almost, not quite. Originally, the name comes from Morocco, from the Rif Mountains. It used to be Ben Sultan, sons of Sultan, on the wrong side of the bed, but that's where we were.
And then the family, when you were born, are Gibraltarian.
I was born here, that's right.
And do you think there is a genuine cultural underpinning of the Rock?
Incredibly strong. Thanks to Franco. Before the frontier problems and the siege and all that, we were like almost second-class citizens here.
This is when Franco closed the border
That's
in the
correct.
1960s. General
1960s,
Franco.
that's
Yes.
right, yeah. And we were very concentrated, and all we could hear was the advertising, the propaganda from Spain saying that we were, immigrants, prostitutes, and everything, drug smugglers, it works. And suddenly we turned around and said, hey, they're talking about us.
So did they used to broadcast across the water here?
Totally. They used to broadcast on Spanish radio, Spanish television, and we didn't have television in those days, so we would watch Spanish TV, and it was terrible. The propaganda was like Nazi Germany.
But then, of course, right back to the origins of Gibraltar as a British territory in 1713. I mean, there's been various ornaments in the hills of Spain, have there not?
Yes, in fact, in 1704, when Admiral Rooke took Gibraltar, the Queen of Spain apparently had a little tower, a little castle built there, and she sat there. It was called the Seat of the Queen. And she wouldn't eat or drink until she saw the Spanish flag hoisted on the top. And Admiral Rooke, being a gentleman, hoisted the Spanish flag so she wouldn't die of hunger.
And how long did that last for, the Spanish flag hoisted?
The Spanish flag, I think it was about 10 minutes, just...
To allow the Queen to break her fast with honour?
Yes.
Well, he must have been quite a gentleman, Admiral Rooke.
And she must have been a very silly woman.
But she was a queen.
Oh, yes. Well, that doesn't really follow, or does it?
Now, David, 96% of the people of Gibraltar voted to remain in the European Union. I mean, that's an overwhelming result in anybody's terms. What was the motive forces behind such an overwhelming result?
Very simple. It was a very pragmatic vote. The only way that we kept Spain at bay was by all of us being inside the European Union, and the European Union would keep Spain more or less in reign so that they wouldn't do any more problems with the frontier or all the things that they used to do politically. So we voted pragmatically to stay in the Union. My heart, Brexit. And for many Gibraltarians, we don't have much faith in the European Union. It was practical, it worked.
I mean, for example, recent events in Catalonia would have reinforced that scepticism about the European Commission's good
intentions. It's very complicated. The Catalonian situation is very complicated, and it's got legal connotations that work against them, whereas we have the opposite. We have legal constraints that cement our being here. The Treaty of Utrecht.
But in particular, I would have thought the lesson from Catalonia is that the European Commission would side with a loyal European Union member, i.e. Spain, almost regardless of circumstances.
Well, it has to. Spain owes a lot of money to Europe. They're not going to go and spoil their clients. It has to pay that back.
Stay with us for more fascinating insight from David Bentata after the break. Welcome back to the Alex Salmond Show from Gibraltar. So tell us a bit about this book here, David, it's Head, Heart and Soul. I seem to remember that quote from somewhere.
Actually, I like writing poetry, and my friends told me, well, why don't you do a book? And I decided to do it, and I was thinking of a title for it. And in a reply that I got from David Cameron, when he was Prime Minister, he told me he had fought for a change in the European Union, head, heart and soul. And I thought that's a terrific title for the book. And I used it.
But the book was more successful than Cameron's referendum campaign.
Yes, definitely. It's still the jury's out on that, isn't it?
It's quite interesting that you never would believe that Cameron's heart was in the European referendum campaign. In a way, perhaps it was in the Scottish referendum campaign. You know, he an instinctive unionist, but you never got the impression during the European Union referendum campaign that Cameron's absolute heart and soul was in his...
Cameron was right in what he did in one particular way. The European Union is a club. If you don't like the rules of the club, you change the rules, and you try to get people to support you to change the rules. Otherwise, you have to get out. And he was trying to get the rules changed so that Britain didn't have to get out. It didn't work.
David, tell us a little about the people of Gibraltar. I mean, what is the mix here? And are people wanting more people in Gibraltar, or are you a bit like some of the folks in England want less?
Well, no, that's about 2 or 3 questions you've included there. Basically, Gibraltar was a garrison. The garrison required food and drink and everything. And from Morocco, the supplies were coming in from Morocco. That brought in Moroccans and Moroccan Jews doing the trading. Then when the war was over, there were several sieges, but in between you had Spaniards coming in here, replacing the Spaniards that left and went to a city called San Roque on that side. Obviously English people, British people, English, Scottish, Irish stayed here. And then Moroccans started coming in later when the Spanish workforce was taken away by Franco. And we have a great mixture here of cultures and of people, and thankfully there is a lot of not just tolerance, but harmony between the different communities.
So Gibraltar is very proud of its ethnic diversity and its ability for everyone to rub along.
I think so. I am very proud of it.
And what about this poetry? I mean, what's the deep well in which you draw when you're writing about events here?
Boredom, perhaps, I don't know. All 101 poems are written about things that have happened to me or things that I've seen, love stories, broken hearts, and I just put it down on paper. And people love it. I do recitals. I've done recitals in Spain, in England, here. And people seem to like it, so I enjoy it terrific.
Another book coming out? You're going to perhaps lift a quotation from me somewhere about the dream shall never die or something like that?
I've got another book out already of short stories, and now I'm working on another book again.
And what's the artistic scene like in Gibraltar?
Amazing.
Yeah.
You would not believe that 30,000 people could have so much art in them. Again, thanks to Spain for a great amount. By enclosing us here, it made us concentrate on what we had.
So your argument would be, David, that the Gibraltarian identity was forged in the fire of being ostracised by the Franco regime.
Totally.
And out of that identity, when do you see the future of this
future's
rock?
Very bright, except it doesn't only depend on us. We are a tiny pawn in the chess game. The outside forces of Spain and Britain will dictate whether we will be successful or not. By ourselves, we can be successful, no question about it.
And are people, an original Gibraltarian like yourself, are you at all attracted by, I don't know, the Liechtenstein model? Could you see, I mean, now you've got your own football team, could you see going further than that?
Gibraltar is a very particular situation. We cannot imitate other places. We have different conditions. It has to be our solution for our problems, not somebody else's solution for their problems, and adopted by us. That wouldn't work.
So sitting here, overlooking Morocco on one side, Spain on the other side, the rock lying before us, and pushing 80 degrees with a lovely cooling wind. What would you say the main reasons for people coming to Gibraltar were?
It's a great little place. It's the center of the world, believe it or not. If you live here, you find that you're like in an extended family. Most people know each other, know of each other. It's easy to get along with. Crime is low. People are nice.
David, you're a great advert for the rock. Now, I can't come to one of your poetry recitals, but what I can do is present you with the Alex Salmond Quake for appearing in the show.
Thank you.
You know the drill. Whiskey, only Scotch. In the quake, and you pass it around your close friends.
Thank you very much. That is really nice.
David. Thank you.
Thank you.
But there's more to Gibraltar than politics and the economy. Interesting though these subjects are, let's talk for a bit about the people of the rock and see how these changing background influences have affected the communities that make up Gibraltar. I'm joined by Trino Cruz, a poet, artist locally, charting the changing nature of the influences on Gibraltar. Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show, Trino.
Hello, thank you very much.
How would you say the great economic changes that have taken place and have affected the complexion of Gibraltar and its culture over the last generation?
Well, it's been an interesting time which has had big implications certainly in my generation. I mean, we've lived an initial period with let's say, a very fluid relationship with Spain, then a closure of border early in our lives, and then 15 years of more of an island life with very close relationship with the UK. We turned towards the UK. So I think the transition has also been social, with I think the incorporation of many new people into Gibraltar.
Let's look specifically about the military footprint. I mean, 25 years ago, military spending was the majority of the Gibraltar economy. It was 60%, now it's 6%. And it's been replaced by a service economy. What does that mean for the communities who make up the Rock?
Well, it means that really the physical presence of the military forces in Gibraltar was reduced dramatically. And that was replaced over time, between I would say, certainly the 80s and 90s in particular, by a workforce for the new sectors that were evolving. These people came from all over the world, and many of them are still here today. So therefore, that shift economically had massive implications in a social sense. Gibraltar suddenly changed from being, I would say, a fairly stable community from, let's say, the original components from Mediterranean origins, the English, the Jewish communities, the Hindu communities, and then evolved into really incorporating, I would say, mostly Anglo-Saxon individuals certainly from the UK, but from South Africa, from the English-speaking world in the broader sense.
When General Franco closed the border back in the late 60s, did it have the unintended consequence of forging a Gibraltarian identity against that adversity?
That certainly was the case. I mean, it was one of the most significant outcomes of that.
It certainly wasn't the General's plan.
No, but certainly, I mean, before that, I would say that the identity was a softer identity, if anything. Then all of a sudden, there was one major thing in common for all members of the community, wherever they were, from all social standings, etc. So I think all of a sudden, that emerged as one cohesive sort of, I think, part of the identity, which had big implications for the future.
Although they say that living in interesting times, the old Chinese curse, is a great boon for artists. So, I mean, all these political changes you've seen in your lifetime in Gibraltar and the recent change of Brexit and challenges, they may cause headaches for the politician, but it's good news for the artists, is it not?
Certainly. I think, I mean, as you go through these periods, you don't realize to what extent they can be meaningful. But certainly, I mean, what they have done is they've, forced us to really be resourceful, and as well culturally, I think, to really consider, where we sit in a cultural sense. And in my case, I've really, over time, come to the conclusion really that Gibraltar, with its heritage and which is so rich and diverse, serves as a wonderful sort of stepping stone, into the much, let's say, broader world in the cultural and a human sense as well.
Now, you write your poetry in Spanish. Is there an extent to which, despite the political control and despite the complexion of the population, that Gibraltar really is a Spanish land? Or is it more of an imperial outpost in Europe? Or is the African influence still a very strong and predominant? What is Gibraltar? I
mean, obviously I can't answer for everybody, but I would say that in my case, I have chosen, for part of my work, to express myself in Spanish. And I think that's totally not only legitimate, but obviously, in an artistic sense, it was something which was important for me to do. I also write in English, but it happens that I'm maybe close to a Spanish cultural space, and therefore I have published in Spanish. Looking at it from the poetic sense and the literary sense, I would not jump to the conclusion from there towards, let's say, defining identity. I mean, I find languages are really, a bit like dialects. I mean, poetry is a language. You can express yourself, in English and Spanish and French, in so many languages. And whether you write in Spanish or English, is significant, but it's only part of the story. I think it's not that I'm saying, Spanish culture to me is more important. The fact is, that I have, let's say, a cultural heritage which is Spanish speaking, and somehow that's influenced me to let's say, up till now, for sure, to express myself mostly in Spanish.
True, Cruz, the political environment's uncertain, the economic environment's going to depend on the political outcome, but the artistic scene in Gibraltar is flourishing, is it not?
It is flourishing, and there is, I think, a lot of activity on many fronts. I mean, certainly on the artistic, the literary, the musical, there are many initiatives. And I would say that there is a big drive to actually build on our heritage, much more consciously than in the past, I would say.
And is there anywhere else that you personally would prefer to be working?
Not at all. I think that Gibraltar provides me with a privileged vantage point from which to really look at the world at large today, you know, I mean, without necessarily restricting myself to Gibraltar.
And one question I wanted to ask you, I mean, this scene we're in here, this wonderful botanic gardens, described in Ulysses, but they say that James Joyce never actually came here. How did he manage to capture this without even visiting Gibraltar?
Obviously a man of genius, no doubt, but obviously very well informed, because I think he was receiving sort of regular correspondence from people living, I think an aunt of his was living here in Gibraltar. But it's something which I have difficulty in believing, really, that he never came here.
Well, if it was good enough for James Joyce, it should be good enough for any of us. Thank you so much for the interview.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you.
As we've heard today, the Rock of Gibraltar bestrides 3 worlds. It's Britain's outpost on the continent of Europe. It's part of the Iberian Peninsula. But standing here, I'm only 12 miles from the tip of Africa. Each of these factors have had a substantial influence in making up the diverse communities of this fascinating territory. One thing's for certain, Gibraltarian identity has been forged in times of adversity. That's going to stand them in good stead in the interesting times ahead. Join us next week. We'll be looking at what the economy holds for this fascinating territory. And from all of us here at the Alex Salmond Show, from Tasmina, from the whole of the crew, it's goodbye for now. Next week,
we voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU, and now we have to see what effect a hard Brexit could have in the Gibraltar economy. The reality is we haven't had a hard Brexit scenario yet. We're still in the EU, we're still functioning as we were doing in 2016. We're a small, nimble, diversified economy, so we adapt.
The history of Gibraltar speaks for itself. I mean, it's been under obviously the protectorate of the UK, but it's the resilience of the people as well here. I think Gibraltar is an incredible entrepreneurial group. There's an incredible group of entrepreneurial minds here.